thank you all very much for having me out to speak with you today. It's a real pleasure. Dave and I have spoken together on AI programs twice before, and on each of those occasions, he's gone first, and I've had an opportunity to do rebuttal. Today, I get to go first, and we'll see if I can maybe set some parameters that will challenge him going second. You may think, by the way, my God, we've got a lawyer talking, all he's going to do is tell us what we can't do or what's going to be regulated. That's not the case. I am going to address, if I have time, some of the issues that you see on the screen today. I do want to start by saying that I actually have some good news for the industry, I believe. The House of Representatives just a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, actually passed unanimously. Let me repeat that. The House of Representatives actually passed unanimously a bill that will allow autonomous cars to be tested in the United States in a pretty large extent, 50,000 I think the first year and 100,000 over 2 years, basically on a self-certification basis. Those cars, of course, will be controlled by artificial intelligence technologies, and so I think that's some indication that, at the moment at least, the government is taking the view that we need to do this to remain competitive, and it wants to facilitate rather than hinder industry. But of course, things can change, and this is a quote from an AI skeptic, Mr. Elon Musk. And what's significant about this to me is it's part of a statement that he made this summer at a meeting of the U.S. National Governors Association. Now, the states, of course, have some ability to regulate things like autonomous cars, so this is not an insignificant setting in which to make this kind of statement. He does have, I think, a valid point in the sense that he's put his finger on an issue regarding government regulation in this country that's a real one, and anybody in the industry appreciates this. What tends to happen is, even if they're encouraging at the beginning, when problems arise, there's a tendency to overreact and overregulate. But his concern as a skeptic of the technology is that it takes the government forever to do things. And you can see the tail end of the quote that I've got here: with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. So that's the skeptic saying we need the government involved. But I want to spend a few minutes today, even though I think right now the government, at least in the U.S., is pretty encouraging. The Europeans are doing some things that raise some legal issues for us, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But to sort of set the stage, I want to give you some sense of where the regulation might come from with regard to artificial intelligence. This is a synopsis of a statement that many of you in this audience will be familiar with, Mr. Asimov's proposed three laws of robotics. First of all, a robot may not injure a human being. Second of all, a robot must obey human instructions, of course, provided they're not to kill another human. And third, and very interesting one to me, a robot must protect its own existence, provided it doesn't do so by violating one of the first two laws. So our topic today is AI. Let me move to that. This is a short statement of some comments made by Warren Etzioni, the chief executive of the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, and he has proposed 3 rules for AI. One of which is an AI system must be subject to the full gamut of laws that apply to human operators. Stated more simply, you can't use AI to do something you can't do legally yourself. Second, an AI must clearly disclose that it is not human. This is particularly applicable, I think, with regard to bots and other uses of AI on the internet, where you don't see who you're dealing with, and you don't know necessarily that you're dealing with software rather than an individual. And third, but not least, an AI system cannot retain or disclose confidential information without explicit approval from the source of information. This is going to come up because, of course, one of the main drivers of AI is the great expansion in the amount of data that's being collected, in many cases data about us. And we're going to see this theme through some of the remaining slides and points I want to make. This is a lot of words for a slide, and I apologize. Let me give you the top. This is taken from a letter that an IBM executive wrote to members of Congress. There is a bipartisan group of House of Representatives who are focused on AI at the moment, and this is a statement. And what's interesting to me is sort of the beginning and the end. The first one is, we must also know how an AI system comes to one conclusion over another. People have a right to ask how an intelligent system suggests certain decisions and not others, especially, and here's where the rubber kind of meets the road, when the technology is being applied across industries such as health care, our very well-being, and other industries, banking and cybersecurity. And this is a very important issue, that whether the AI can explain why it makes decisions it does. Thirdly, at the very end, of course, there's a statement here at the bottom of the page about the protection of public and private data, which is a great concern, particularly to the regulators in Europe. As I say, this is a letter dated June 27 of this year from David Kenny, Senior Vice President at IBM, to members of the Congress, industry leaders, and policy experts. Again, too many words on the slide. Let me just give you the gist of this. In England, which for the moment is still part of the EU, they had a House of Commons Technology Committee look at AI from the standpoint of whether they should be taking any action to regulate it. AI is a subject of great interest in England. They have, of course, a great history in this, going back to the code breakers that you saw in the movie about the Enigma program in World War II. An additional element here, and this is a quote from a U.S. entity, actually, the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence in Menlo Park, California, is, it is critical that one should be able to prove, test, measure, and validate what's going on. And then secondly, we must have a methodology by which testing can be done. But they acknowledge that verification of this and verification of whether the AI is working properly and whether it can explain the decisions it makes poses a real challenge. They recognize that, and for the moment, their ultimate conclusion was, we don't want to wade into regulation just yet. And it's interesting, they gave an example of where AI is and the technical difficulties, which Dave can address better than I, when they talked about the victory of AlphaGo over the world expert in the Go program, the Go board game in Korea, not too long ago. My personal perspective on this, by the way, is I played chess growing up, and my best friend in high school one time talked me into trying to play three-dimensional chess, where the pieces could move vertically as well as horizontally. And it only took me about 30 minutes to decide the only hope I had of mastering the game was to have a drink or two, because I may as well have some fun, otherwise I was not going to get there. I'm not an expert in the Go game. I'm told it is remarkably complex, far more complex than virtually any other board game with which we are familiar. And what's interesting about this quote is, and I know it's hard to read, I'll be happy to give you guys the slides afterwards if you want, is the computer made a move in the game that was such a dramatic departure from traditional game theory that people thought the computer had malfunctioned and would lose. That particular move, however, according to experts in the game who monitored the game, was a primary reason why the computer defeated the best human player of the game. The people who put the AlphaGo program together cannot tell you, to my understanding, why the computer made that move. They cannot explain it. And so this poses a question for those of us on the legal side of things, is how are we going to handle this when AI starts to make decisions? For example, whether you get a loan application approved, whether you get a job, what healthcare regimen you're put on, and so forth. I don't have time today, and Dave would be far better than I to go through explaining this, but all of you, I'm sure, who are active in this field or studying this field are familiar with diagrams like this. This is a very simplified version. You have input nodes, you have performance nodes in the middle, you have output nodes. We're all familiar with the concept of black box. A black box is basically when you know what the input is and the outputs are, but you don't know what happens in between. The challenge with AI is that the associations or the interactions between the performance nodes and the input nodes and the output nodes, their interactions, their relationships, and the values that are created during the course of the process change as the neural network learns. In my particular case, we're talking about neural networks being trained to help cars see, for example, to maneuver in traffic. I won't take the time today to go through all this again. It's too many words on the slide. But the point is, it is very difficult at the moment for even the most expert of designers of AI systems to create a system. They're so busy trying to get the AI to accomplish what they want to accomplish, they're not spending the time yet to focus on providing explanations. So the question arises, how might possible regulation look like? And one thing that's come up is a kill switch. That we want to have a kill switch written into the software that is impregnable. And by that I mean the AI cannot disable the kill switch. And it's been reported that last year Google was working on precisely such in addition to these software programs. There is a group at Harvard University consisting both of legal experts and technicians, technical experts, engineers, who have tried to address this. Again, from the point of view, at least when we're talking about the use of these software programs to determine things like employment, loan applications, healthcare, and so forth, to at least be able to explain why they did. And what they've come up with is that AI or AI devices should at least be able to explain the factors or the justifications for a particular outcome. But recognizing the technical difficulties, what they're not asking for yet is a description of the decision-making processes, because their view is that's not presently possible. They do want to know, however, in addition to that, whether it's possible that changing a given factor will change the outcome. This comes up in the context, for example, of employment. To give you an example, and this is something that Dave and I spoke about at a meeting that Dave and I both spoke at recently. We have a concept in the law called disparate impact. The engineers, the software experts may think the program is completely objective, that the criteria they have built into the program are completely objective and will result in the hiring of the best qualified candidate. The problem from a legal perspective, though, is if the use of that program has a disparate impact based on a protected class basis, if it results in all white males being hired, for example, and not females, or not African Americans, then the employer has a legal problem. And that's why you're beginning to see these thoughts about we need to at least understand the factors, we need to understand whether changing one factor would change the outcome. And then the explanation should be, I'm saying running short of time, the explanation should be given whenever a human or corporation would have to explain it, that the computer program should have to provide that as well. This leaves a lot of questions open. What about the weighing of factors, the weight given to one factor versus another, and what about judgment? Hiring decisions are based on judgment, intuitions. What about all of these things? But you can see this is a start toward trying to come up with a way to provide some explanation that will help those of us in the legal field deal with AI. I don't really have time to go through all of this. Let's just say data privacy is a big issue. I'll click through here. I want to get to something else real quick. Europe. On May 25 of next year, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, goes into effect. The two things that you need to think about with regard to this are, there's at least going to be a restriction, if not a prohibition, on automated decision-making of the types that I've talked about. I think what they're interested in are issues like the employment decisions and the loan decisions that I'm talking about, but query where this will stop. The other issue is whether they impose a right of explanation on the users of AI programs. And there's a pretty good argument based on Recital 71 that they're going to require that. Now you may think, well, I'm sitting here in Dallas, why does it matter? Two reasons. One, the fines for violating the GDPR will be significant, as reflected here. And two, the Europeans are taking a very broad view of who the regulation covers. If your business is using or relying upon data of European individuals, chances are you better be worried about this. So the mere fact that you're physically present here in the U.S. does not mean this is irrelevant to your business. I want to skip over some of these data ownership and IP issues. I want to talk about a case real quick, and then my time is up, and I'll turn it over to Dave. There's a Toyota case that was decided. It was a decision in 2013. This was an unintended acceleration case where the plaintiff's allegation was that she was sitting at a stoplight and the car just took off on its own and ran into a school. She was severely injured in the accident and later died. The lawsuit was brought by the executor of her estate. And I can tell you as a trial lawyer, having technical issues decided in this context is very different than the historical context of contract disputes between two companies, where the issue is, did one company lose money and the other's got to pay? In this case, you're talking about a judge and jury dealing with a death. That is a very different courtroom to be defended in. Now, what happened here? Why is this case significant? Again, there's too much print on the page. Let me just give you the gist of it. The issue before the court was this. The plaintiff's expert could testify that the software controlling the throttle that was at issue was defective. But he could not point, despite spending hours reviewing the source code for the software, he could not point to a specific defect. And Toyota understandably moved to exclude the testimony as not being sufficiently scientifically reliable, and they moved for summary judgment to take the issue away from the jury on the grounds that without that expert's testimony, the plaintiff could not prove that the car was defective. In fact, a California court applying Georgia law decided that expert could testify and the case would go to the jury. That the reasonableness test in this case, and the law of Georgia, which it held allowed defects in an item, a product like a car, could be proven through circumstantial evidence. And there was enough circumstantial evidence based on the expert's allegations regarding the software generally that he was allowed to testify. Now, this case settled. We don't know what would have happened in a courtroom, but I call to mind here, part of the basis for the court's decision was that the software was written in such a way that it would not record the default and the defects, the mistake. And the judge analogized that to a situation where a car is destroyed. In many accidents, the car burns and you don't have any evidence. And in that case, the courts tend to allow the evidence to come in more freely because the car is not present. The event data recorder, for example, cannot be examined. In this particular case, the court's feeling seemed to be that because Toyota, or whoever wrote the software for Toyota, had written in such a way that the software could not explain the defect, that case was going to a jury. It goes back to my fundamental point that there are a variety of legal issues here that are going to be very difficult to deal with in courtrooms and in legislatures for that matter, unless we get to the point where we can provide at least a sufficient explanation of why AI makes the decisions it makes to satisfy whoever the fact finder or decision maker is in that particular context. I'm sure my time is up. I'm going to stop, turn it over to Dave, and we'll be happy to take questions when we're done.
Raise your hand if in the last 2 weeks you've used Siri, Cortana, Amazon Alexa. Keep your hands up. Amazon Alexa, Google Maps, Apple Maps. Okay, look around. That's AI. So it's not a question of when is AI coming? AI is here. So we're all using AI. That in particular is called artificial neurointelligence, where you teach a system to do one thing really well, find something on math, or do voice. So we're in a very interesting time right now. It's a good conversation because it's a point where all of us need to
not guess your guest speaker's password.
It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a good conversation to have, though, because we're all using AI, right? So, and AI is a very different technology. Other technologies, when they happen, it's very visible what happens. With AI, it's very different. When AI works really well, it disappears. You don't know it's working because things just start to work. You find your way on a map. end up buying a product that's something nudged you on, that's exactly what I wanted, And so it's good to know about AI and how it's going to affect not only our businesses, but our lives, So everybody's familiar with this guy. He's always out in front. I think he's the architect of our future. Great guy, love Elon Musk. I'm not sure I'm in line with him when it's talks about AI. We'll talk about that in a moment. But he's actually has a company called Neuralink where they're working on technology called BMI, so brain technology, BCI, brain computer interface, and it's called Neuralink. And he believes that pretty soon we'll be plugging our brains into computers. So we're not there yet. Don't worry about that. We're not there yet. But one thing is for sure, things are going to move a lot faster. So over the next 10 years, we're going to see the progress similar to what we've seen in the last 100 years. And all of that's because of a few things here. Let's talk about the pathway that we're on. So ANI is artificial narrow intelligence. We're there today. Everybody that raised your hand today is using ANI. So we'll see more and more of that in the next 5 to 7 years. You'll see a lot more of these ANI systems coming up. We'll have systems that will actually look at lung scans, and it's already out there now. It'll identify lung tumors better than any doctor ever could. But a single intelligence. The key is they're not doing a general intelligence. You can't take that mapping AI and move it to do something else like knowledge management. It doesn't know that, right? So we're going to have all these narrow intelligences doing these narrow AI things, but we're not at the point where we have AGI, which is kind of where you start to hear all the scary stuff, all the dystopian stuff, things you see in the movies, right? AGI is general intelligence. We're still a ways away from that. I think Kurzweil, can listen to him. He changed the singularity from 2040 to 2029. He moved it up. So at this point in time where we start to evolve with computers, with technology, with AI, not like this, but like this, he's predicting that in 2029. And of course, artificial superintelligence, that's where we all submit to our robot overlords. I, for one, will welcome them with open arms, for fear of death. But I don't think we see that in our lifetime, anyone in this room, but we're here. That's where we are. But what's interesting is we're there, but we're moving pretty rapidly up and to the right. So we're on our way to AGI, and there's a reason this is happening. 3 things are happening today. We've had AI winters in the past, right? So AI had a lot of promise and then kind of died for a while back in the 60s and the 70s and 80s again, and died again. So we've had AI winters. I'm here to tell you right now we will have no more AI winters because the environment's different. Back then we didn't have the computing power, we didn't have the software, we didn't have the data, the way to use the data. We have all of those things now. So right now you have hardware that can process information 1,000 times, the GPU is processing 1,000 times faster than CPU. So companies like NVIDIA are building the hardware that's going to be the operating hardware for autonomous cars and everything else. You'll see data centers with GPUs in it until we get to quantum, right? The second thing is software, so AI and deep learning. So now we have deep learning systems, neural nets that are able to learn a lot deeper than they were before. Back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, neural nets had a few layers deep. Now they're hundreds of layers deep. So you have systems now that can actually look at data, look at pictures, and start to learn from them over time. And so the deep learning is where machines are starting to learn from what they see. And then data. We're collecting more data now than ever before, and with IoT coming up, we're going to get even more data. So those 3 things together are causing an acceleration of AI right now that's going to affect virtually every industry in the world. So if you want to know how to do it, look at these 6 companies. They all have a couple things in common, right? So one of them is they understand the value of data. These are companies that know the ticket to the dance is to own the data. Every one of these companies has multiple data centers. They own the data. They know I've got to get the data, and they have products and technologies that garner information, pull information from you every day, because they can learn more and more about you. The more they can learn about you, they combine with what they learn about you, and you, and you, and you, pull it together, and I can start to predict things. I predict what you might want. So everyone's playing that game, and the way they do it is with AI. So all these companies are buying AI companies at a very fast rate. There's three or four acquisitions every month, of AI companies. It's actually one of the problems we're facing. We got a lot of people at UTD here. I'm curious to hear if professors are getting offers to come to companies. I'm not in favor of that. I think we're hitting a point where even the AI machine learning talent's getting sucked out of companies and they're going to these 6 companies. And even professors are leaving universities to these companies. They're just like cutting the roots. So we have some things we got to start thinking about. So why do we do this? Because we as humans have an insatiable desire to enhance our biology. And right now we're limited by our biology. In humans, we think about 60 bits a second. That's how fast you process information, whether you do that or not. Probably a lot slower after a few drinks. I was speaking in Ireland last week and a guy questioned me about that. What about after a Guinness? But AI processes information at 1 trillion bits a second. To make matters a little worse, we remember about 65% of what we ingest, and again, after a few Guinness, it's probably 30%. But AI remembers 100% of everything it touches. So think about that. Massive scale, 100% recall, right? That's why these systems where you have learning from lung scans, right? Something very interesting happened. The system not only learned from looking at millions of lung scans how to find lung cancer better than any doctor ever, it also recognized that there are these patterns that are happening on the side of the tumors that can tell it what kind of a tumor it is. It's been there all the time. That information's been there the whole time. We couldn't see it, but we can through AI. So it gets interesting. There's a shift happening right now. This is kind of touching on something that Bob talked about. How do we? I made a note on it. Asking AI to explain how it made a decision. And so I think I kind of chuckle when I hear that, because we don't know how AI learns. We don't know. So I did a talk in San Francisco once. It's actually one we went to, Bob. And I talked to the Google guy who spoke after me backstage, and he's the guy that did Google Translate. So they took Google Translate, that system, and they fed it 10 years of human curation data, right, the human curated data, and it learned it in 48 hours. Then it kept learning. So the accuracy of Google Translate went through the roof, right? So now it's all AI, it's all deep learning system. I asked the developer in the back, I said, so how's it learning? This was his answer. We don't know. We think it developed an Uber language, and it's comparing other languages to that Uber language. We think, but we don't know. So how can you asking AI to explain to you how it's done something is making the assumption that AI thinks the way we think. I don't know if that's a very good assumption. So we're not too far from robots building robots that build robots, right? So you start to kind of see this, where we're heading is kind of an evolution of trust, right? At what point do we start to trust AI to do something for us? Sometimes it's just a result. We get a better result with AI, so we trust it. Maybe it's a little step forward. But it's an evolution. It's not something that's going to happen overnight when we switch to AI and trust everything it does. It's going to be this series of just AI doing things for us, and we get more and more comfortable with it. None of you would give up your maps and Siri and Cortana and Alexa today. None of you would give it up. We can go back, right? So we trust it for that. But I love this quote from iRobot. Because we all know what happened in that movie, right? That's just stupid. So the real disruption, though, is not AI. The disruption is automation, right? So when you think about it, in the Industrial Revolution, we mechanized, we had machines, and then we automated physical work. And then we got into factories, and we automated industrial work, right? In the Computer Revolution, we automated knowledge work. But now something very different is happening. With AI, we're actually automating automation. Think about that. That's why the change is going to happen so fast. That 10x change from 100 years to 10 years. That's why that's happening. Because we not only have all the pieces, we have the data, the software, and the hardware, but we have the ability now to automate, to create automation. It's going to allow us to automate our processes and even automate those. So the rate of change is going to be astronomical. I think that's the biggest change that faces our country and in the world. It's not so much that the change is happening. We've had this happen before. Technology has always created change. You don't have operators plugging things in a wall anymore, right? You don't have farmers pushing a hoe down on the dirt. Right? We've automated things before, but this time it's different. It's going to happen 10x faster. So some people are saying 47% of American jobs will be lost to automation in 20 years. PwC's 38% replaced by automation. I think, again, I'm kind of coming to the point where these are statistics that are basically saying that all the jobs we have today, this many are going away, not taking into account the new jobs that are going to be created by AI, right? So, you got to start thinking about that. But there is one thing for sure, and that is we are going to have to start to redefine what we call a job and redefine the skills that are required to do a job. That has to all change now. So Amazon, their warehouse, right? Hopefully they come here. So Tricia Scott was a picker. And this just happened a few months ago. So her job and a few others, she was replaced by a robot. And something very interesting happened. She didn't lose her job. Matter of fact, not only did she not lose her job, they're hiring 50,000 more people, right? So a couple things are happening here. One is that she's actually managing robots now. So robots aren't at the point where they're completely autonomous and doing everything by themselves. They require people, like Bob talked about in his talk, and there's still this place, this role for humans to play with robots and to provide that judgment and sentiment and things like that we can't get from machines. But we are looking for AI to be something that can radically alter our productivity. You should be able to be 90%, 100% more effective working with AI than you are without it in certain industries. So this company called Box came out. They're a competitor to Amazon and Costco. Real small company though. They didn't have all the money they had. So they believe their advantage was automation. And so what they did was they automated everything. They saw demand increase by 600% because they became so efficient. And guess what? They're hiring more people. So I don't think the short term is as dire as some of these people are saying, like, all these jobs are going away and we can't do anything about it. First of all, we know this is happening. We know it's coming. So we can't be stupid as a country or as a world, as a globe, and not be prepared for it. So I think in the beginning you're going to see it, you'll be able to build jobs, right? It's going to be some truck drivers, taxi drivers, and retail clerks. Think about retail, it's going to change dramatically. Has anybody heard about Amazon Go? They actually went to up there. Watch this. It's a video. Oh well. I'll just tell you what it is. It's Amazon Go. It's a store you walk in, you take things off the shelf, put them in your bag, and you walk out. There's no check-in counter. And it works. And if you find something in your bag you don't want, you put it back on the shelf. It doesn't matter. You can do that. It's faster, it's more convenient. That's what's coming. So these types of things, the general rule, Andrew Ng, one of the most famous deep learning scientists, maybe the most famous guy, he said that any job that takes just 2 seconds, if your job is you're doing something like approving a mortgage application, and you're looking at a few things and making a decision, go to the next one, go to the next one, that's going to be automated. The things that won't be automated are the things where you're solving problems. You're solving problems, and it's much more about thinking and judging and deeper thought. So I kind of tell people, don't aspire for jobs that don't take much mind power. Don't aspire for that. And if you're in a job that's doing that now, if we know we have a quarter of our population that's in that now, we've got to start providing training. Amazon will come here and they open a warehouse. Why don't we have a school or an organization or a community college that's offering a kind of a light engineering degree that trains people how to work with robots, in manufacturing environments, things like that. We have to start thinking differently. So what's really interesting about AI is you're going to start to see does 3 things in an environment. It dematerializes, demonetizes, and democratizes things. So what I mean by that, dematerialization is, look at your phone, right? You've got a camera in here, you've got maps in here, you have a microphone, you have an accelerometer. If you added up the cost of those sensors 20 years ago, it would be over $10,000. And now sensors, GPS sensors, $2. You can go build an application with a GPS sensor for $2. So we're dematerializing and demonetizing things every day. And AI is playing an accelerated role in that. When that happens, you start to democratize things. So now things become more available, right? So anybody can take videos. Anyone can, do complex things on the phone. And it's AI. This is a little erratic here, but I was trying to get a lot into this in 20 minutes, and there's an hour's worth of content to do. But I think AI is a real apex technology. It's something that you're going to see in virtually every industry. There's not an industry that will not be affected by AI. It's just a matter of how it's going to be used. And I think when you're in your industry, in your company today, the question you have to ask yourself is, what can we automate? How can we engage automation in our business to make ourselves more productive? Because the other side of this is not just it's not job loss and like that. It's actually that costs are going to go down. As consumers, it's going to cost less to go to the hospital. Maybe you don't have to go to the hospital. Now you don't have to go anymore. So we dematerialize that because everybody know the X Prize. What's the name on this thing? Deb works with these guys. The X Prize, they put out a tricorder, where you could, $10 million the company figured out, you can blow into it or spit into it, and it tells you what you have. And it sold one at last April. Now, they haven't got the cost down yet, but the idea is that you could have every family could have one of these things for $99. So if you have the flu, you blow into it, the AI diagnoses what you have, it knows your medical history, diagnoses what you have, knows you need Tamiflu, knows who your pharmacist is, has an order, it's picked up by Amazon, brought to your house, you never left bed. That's coming, but what happens? We're dematerializing the hospital for small things. So that's the promise of AI. Those types of things will happen in every industry, so even bigger things, right? So what's some of the stuff? Autonomous cars, they have LiDAR, so they shoot